Like I said, I'm a realtor by trade, a real estate planner. I am so deeply entrenched in the senior community here in Santa Barbara that we formed a professional association, which we refer to affectionately as SBCINA, which up here it shows SINA, the Senior Industry Network Association. And we, in partnership with one another, communities like Maravilla, a lot of like VNA Health and Friendship Center, other communities around town, Alzheimer's Association, we put on events to educate people on the things that they should really be aware of as they are thinking about the senior loved one in their life and how to appropriately support them. So can we all agree there isn't a manual or an instruction manual on how to support the senior loved ones in our life?
We want our family to support us.
Right, I know. Yes, I agree. Do they know that, by the way?
They do. Yeah.
Okay, good.
It always scares them to death.
Oh. Well, you know, after attending today's talk, at least you'll be able to provide them with some more resources that they have at their disposal. So when I'm not out transacting houses or putting on community events to educate people on what they need to know, you can also find me at the YMCA. I'm one of the swim coaches there. I coach both of my sons' swim team, and I also coach the master's swim program for the YMCA. You can also find me doing other things around town, like volunteering and just spending my time with people. That's what I do. So we're going to cover a lot, like I said, and this is really what we're going to focus on and try to expand. My intention is for you to walk out of here with more knowledge than you can possibly fathom about how to form a really cohesive plan and really build out a vision for living out golden years, is what I call it. And we're going to kick this off with a little vocabulary lesson. The senior industry has very specific vocabulary. First of all, I want to start with the F word. We never say the F word. The F word being facility. A lot of people refer to retirement communities such as this as a facility. And I say, you know what, a facility is a warehouse, or no, that's not what this is. This is a community, and the people who reside here are residents. They're not patients. That's a medical term. And by the way, if somebody does end up in a skilled nursing facility, we still try to avoid using that F word, and we call them SNFs or SNUFs, one of the two. And then some of our senior loved ones, when it comes to their ADLs, they do have some issues with continence and other things. But we don't say so-and-so is wearing diapers. So-and-so uses briefs. That's how they get around. That's just part of their life. So if any of those really resonated with you, definitely write them down, because there will be a quiz at lunch. Just kidding. Just kidding. So we're going to talk a lot about these things that you see up on the screen. Like I said, write down your questions and we'll get to it. So in today's market, people, especially here in Santa Barbara, we have a very affluent community, so to speak. Our average transaction, our median sales price here in Santa Barbara for an entry-level home starts at approximately $2 million. And the way that I view real estate, the way that I operate is the sale of real estate should not be limited to a transaction. There needs to be questions around strategic planning, the fact that 1 out of every 3 properties, statistically speaking, in the United States is a rental. And a lot of people find themselves to be accidental investors when they inherit somebody else's property or they receive a step up in basis on their spouse's property. There are a lot of things that that are working either with or for the estate, and that's where I come in and bring in what I call the power team of four. Every family, every affluent American family should have, yeah, there's water. Every affluent American family should have a family attorney, the family financial planner to manage the family finances, the family CPA who's filing taxes for the family and or the estate, but who's managing the family real estate? Where that's where I come in with my certifications and the things that I've been a part of. And that's why when I have conversations with people, when it comes to real estate, I want to make sure that the whole family is aptly supported by what I call the power team of four. And so we just talked about this. I am part of the, let me just go back 1 second. So real estate planner, what does that mean? I get that a lot. People say, aren't you just a realtor? No, I've had a lot of special training. In USA Today, there was an article about the founder of the trademark term, Keller Williams Real Estate Planner. This is a group, a realtor and his wife in Hawaii. They built their practice for 20 years on serving seniors and doing what I do. I got my business blueprint from them. And they even wrote a book about how to avoid conflict and how real estate should be thought of in terms of building and maintaining the legacy, avoiding conflict, and coming up with questions in advance to really spearhead those productive conversations. And so I'm a part of this. I actually was just appointed to regional ambassador for the Central and Southern California region. There are over 500, I believe, certified real estate planners within our Keller Williams community. So that's really beneficial for us because we actually have calls with each other once a week, and we're constantly checking in with each other on what they're seeing. A lot of people have questions about step up in basis and how it's affected in their state, and so a lot of us are chiming in on that conversation to support each other. But what I love about this in particular was I had a client here locally who had some money. They wanted to do a DSCR loan, which is a debt service coverage ratio loan. It's basically a loan that is given on the potential rental income of a property. So if you're an investor, you don't have to send in your P&L and all your tax returns and all those things to get qualified for the loan. The qualification is what is the income potential on this property. And so when I was networking with my usual colleagues, one of them said, by the way, I have this property in Indianapolis that's just behind the Indianapolis Speedway. It would make a great midterm or short-term rental. And I sent that to my clients here locally. They jumped on it. And they were getting an 8% cap rate on their investment at one point. So there's a lot of advantage there with networking and just a lot of collaboration, which I'm very proud to be a part of. Oh yeah, I just talked about that. We can just breeze through that. So when I got my start in real estate, it was because I was downsizing my grandmother. And that's where I realized there's such a need for support in this niche. Like I said earlier, there isn't an instruction manual of how to support an aging loved one. Now, the reason why I consider myself to be the easy button for seniors is because my family and I, we've been through a lot. I never say we've been through everything and seen everything because something new always manages to surface. A couple of listings ago, I had a case where the trustees who were out of state got the call from Mission Park, which is a SNF over here in Oak Park, that their senior loved one could not go home. She was cognitively impaired, and they had a week to find memory care for her. Now, a lot of people come to me when they get that call. They come to me with the following questions. Where does she go? What do we do with the house? And what about all the stuff in it? Should we get a moving company? So I'm going to say, hold on. First, we need to downsize. This is where I put my placement hat on, and I work with them and introduce them to the different communities here, and we talk about what may or may not be a fit. If they want some more personalized, a lot more guidance, then I would recommend a senior placement specialist here in Santa Barbara, who also have really good knowledge and relationships on the different communities and the nuances of what make them special and more of a fit for certain types of seniors than others. So we make that connection if necessary, but the bottom line is we get the senior loved one into a community. And by the way, when it comes to assisted living, you're gonna fall into wait lists, and you're also gonna be wanting to see if they have memory care. In this particular situation, we needed memory care. Getting into memory care is extremely difficult because there are just simply not enough beds nationwide. So in an ideal situation, a senior would want to move into a community, an assisted living community, and graduate as their needs evolve into memory care on site. More on that later, but I said when it comes to emptying the home, first of all, we need to determine what your capital gains liability is. Talk about that in a moment, because the sale of real estate is a taxable event, and we definitely need the CPA and the financial planner weighing in on it. If the home is in a trust, we need to run some things by the estate planning attorney as well. More on that in a moment. But when it comes to emptying the home and getting the senior loved one moved into, I knew this was gonna happen, getting the senior loved one moved into the next community, I'm gonna say, do not hire a moving company. You need to hire, write this down, senior move manager, who is a member of the National Association of Senior Move Managers. We refer to that as NASM, N-A-S-M-M. And I have a brochure from one of my favorite local companies, just outside the door, from Curated Transitions. The last job that they did on my listing, there's an art to downsizing. Downsizing is not just a move. A move is what I did after I divorced my husband and found my new condo. That was a move. Boy, that was a move. But downsizing is an actual transition. And so the senior move managers are gonna come in and they are going to say, okay, we need favorite blanket, favorite pajamas, favorite robe, favorite pictures, most important pictures, documentation, we need this and that. They're gonna take those favorite items, the necessary items, and they are going to outfit the new residents in the new retirement community to be as close as possible to the existing residents that they've always lived in. Like I said, it is an art and it is a transition, because the senior loved one who now can't go home can simply transition into this new apartment that still feels like home. They're also going to make piles for the trustees to say yes or no to. Another one of my favorite senior move managers who's really high up with NASM, the organization of NASM, is a woman by the name of Marty Stevens Hebner, and she wrote this book, How to Move Your Parents and Still Be on Speaking Terms. The moral of that story, you hire a senior move manager. You write them a check, you get out of their way.
How expensive is it?
That can range depending on it really depends on how much is in the house and how much they have to pack, clear out, etc. And everybody, without fail, always miscalculates and underestimates the number of hours involved and the amount of time it will take. So when I meet with people and they say, oh, we can get this done in a week, I'm gonna bet that it's gonna be twice that. And usually I'm right. Yeah.
What about if they don't have the number of rooms that you have? Like, I have 2 bedrooms.
Yeah.
Or the square footage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately,
Can you give us a sort of like a range?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no magic formula that I can say if 2 bedrooms, then it's this. It completely depends on how much stuff. They will come and give you a free quote.
Okay.
Absolutely. And the brochure out there, her owner of the company, Curated Transitions, her name is Maya. She does free consultations all the time. So once we get all of that done, that's the big component of the easy button for seniors and their families, is getting a senior move manager in there. Go ahead, Rick.
So, where does the furniture go? Once you pack it and you move it, where does it go? I mean, storage, or that's?
If you want it to go into storage, it can be put in storage. Sometimes furniture doesn't fit.
Okay.
I mean, it really just depends.
What's your thoughts behind that? I mean, where does it really go? I mean, what is?
I mean,
kind of possible where you.
Yeah, and we can talk a lot about some of the things I've seen over lunch, specific to furniture.
Yes.
On one of the most recent jobs that we did, the senior move managers, they just made Craigslist postings and posted on Facebook Marketplace, and other people would come and pick it up. Worst case scenario.
Estate sale sometimes?
Some kind, yeah, and they do work with people who do estate sales. So there are a lot of different options.
Yes.
Has anybody heard the term the sandwich generation? Yeah.
Taking care of children, their own children.
Yep.
And their parents.
Yes. Yes. So the thing is with the sandwich generation, and this is why it's so important, is because the sandwich generation is essentially responsible for taking care of their own children while taking care of their parents. And so the sandwich is the people in the middle. So we have people who advocate for parents, we have people in support who advocate for children, but who's advocating and supporting the people in the middle? Well, my colleague Cynthia McNulty is a program manager at the Coast Caregiver Resource Center, and they provide resources for the sandwich generation. For example, if somebody in that sandwich generation finds themselves needing counseling, Coast Caregiver Resource Center, CCRC, will provide counseling at no cost for people who are in that position. They will also provide a lot of support and resources. Just in general, the VNA is also a good resource for people who are taking care of elderly loved ones as well. They offer a lot of supplies, they offer, the list is endless, and you can grab your brochure and talk to them. The thing that I want to be very transparent about is a lot of people that I talk to who are in the middle, they often have the same approach when it comes to supporting their senior loved one, and that is, well, everything's good for now, we're just waiting and seeing what happens. What I'm interpreting is that you're waiting for a crisis to happen. And that crisis could be a stroke, a fall. The list goes down. But not to be morbid, but who has a plan for what happens if something happens to them? Where would you go? Who would be administering that? Those are all things that need to be discussed and written down, bottom line. Because you don't want to be in a position where my clients who are out of state called me and said, we're out of state, we don't live there, we don't know what to do. Thankfully, I was able to shepherd them throughout the downsizing and the real estate transaction, but that's what we're trying to avoid, is that, what do we do now? So one of the things that I talk about with how we got my grandmother to accept the downsizing and move forward with the downsizing, we were always saying, we need to build out your vision for your golden years. What does that look like? And she always said, oh, I'm just gonna be with my family. My family is so important to me. And I said, no. What is your vision for your golden years? And she said, I just wanna be with my family. So we really drilled in, I just want to be with my family is not a vision. The vision for her ended as this. I am within X amount of miles from this person, X amount of miles, like a radius within these people. I am not gonna miss another family barbecue. I'm not gonna miss another birthday because I don't drive anymore. I'm going to hold every single one of my great grandbabies. At the time she had 4, now she has 6 that she's watching over from above. At the time, my 2 were made up of half of the great-grandchild population. So that's what we did, and we came up with the plan, okay, who's gonna get your stuff there? That's where, once we had that vision, that concrete vision of where we're gonna be and why, those are the essential nuggets that are necessary to come up with the vision for the golden years. And then all that's needed from the family is to push that easy button to make it happen. The moral of this story is, don't wait for a crisis to force a conversation, because oftentimes when that happens, it's too late. And by the way, when it comes to spouses and or the sandwich generation taking on those roles of caregivers, it's not fair to them for a lot of reasons, both physically and emotionally. So I would say you'll want to, and I tell this to people all the time, your kids want to enjoy their relationship with you as their parent. When it comes to needing care, bringing in care, because we want to prevent isolating in place. We want people to age in place and on their terms, whether they age in place in their home, which is an option, or they age in place in a community. This is where we go down the rabbit holes of where is the most appropriate to age. Go ahead, Sandy.
What does SNF stand for?
Skilled Nursing Facility.
Thank you. Facility.
No facility.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
So when it comes to deciding where we age, it's a very complex question, and no 2 cases are ever going to be the same. How many of us in the room have kids? So are any of your kids the same? Okay, thank God, mine aren't either.
The same.
Is their personality the same?
Oh, absolutely not.
Exactly. So going down, how do we evaluate where we age in place? Do we age in place in our home? Everybody wants to do that. Or does it make sense to age in place in a retirement community such as this? So in addition to having your physician fill out the 602A form, they're also going to be evaluating ADLs, activities of daily living. Activities of daily living are going to include hygiene, dressing, eating, transferring, toileting, and continence. So when it comes to deciding what kind of support somebody needs, these are the foundational items that everybody is going to be evaluating, and that is how we decide what is needed. For example, if somebody who has early onset dementia wants to get into an independent living community, such as, I don't know, Villa Santa Barbara, that's more of a social model, and that's not gonna be the best fit for them, because they're gonna need to be in a place that actually provides memory care. For example, in memory care, they change the lock codes every 12 hours. They have wander guards. They have extra support to keep the loved one safe. So that's why it's important to have that very clear idea in the mind of everybody's to where the senior loved one's ADLs are at. What kind of support do they need? Do they need people coming in and helping them to get dressed? One way to start this conversation is to bring in home care. And I work with a lot of people around town who do home care. Home care is going to be that companion level care. When we started this with my grandma, for example, her arms couldn't get high enough so she could put on her blouses. So when we got the home care in, and by the way, home care typically comes with either a 2 or a 4-hour minimum per day. If you hire an agency, it may or may not be the same person who comes. If you hire a caregiver independent of an agency, you can certainly work out a schedule and or a routine with them so that you have the same person supporting you day in, day out, depending on how much you pay them. But when it came to my grandmother putting on her blouses, the home care individual would hold up her elbows so that she could put on her blouses. The home care individual did not dress her. She simply supported her arms so she could dress herself, to maintain her dignity and independence with her activity of daily living. Go ahead.
Is there a pamphlet with this information without trying to write all of this down?
No,
Okay,
but I can send this to you.
that's all right, I'll write it down.
So just so you know, home care, which is basic support of ADLs, there's no medical involved, there's no, it's just very basic care. Nobody's going to be monitoring vitals or administering medication, that sort of thing. When it comes to home health care, that is going to require a prescription. And the VNA provides a lot, they actually provide both. But home health care is going to require a prescription, it's going to require that the senior be homebound. It's going to be covered by Medicare, but it only covers up to 90 days per incident. This is where a lot of people find themselves paying for out-of-pocket care, and that can go real quick. And that's where, especially if you're doing 24-hour care, that's where it can be even in the 6-figure range. I have a couple of colleagues who do reverse mortgages, which are great options if you're looking at how to maximize the built-up equity in the home, and it can be a really good option if the scenario is right. But a lot of people are taking out reverse mortgages to pay these medical bills because they're no longer covered by Medicare.
They don't have
Insurance.
care.
Right. Right. And so that's when people get to this point, that's where the question then becomes, how can we keep our senior loved ones safe without spending 20 or 50 grand a month? Well, there are a lot of options. So I gave you a copy of this. It's on the cardstock. It's the thick piece of paper. And this actually changes pretty frequently. The point I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. Some communities are going to require a buy-in, an entrance fee, and some of these buy-ins are going to be 6 figures. Casa de Rinda is known for having the largest possible buy-in, up to $2.5 million. Believe it or not, the most expensive CCRC, which is what Casa de Rinda and Valverde are, they are CCRCs. That stands for Continuing Care Retirement Center. They provide the continuum of care, everything from independent living into memory care. And actually, Vista Del Monte kind of falls into that category because they do offer memory care through Valverde. They just don't have it on site. So if you look at what the buy-ins are, and then you look at the wait lists, this is why it's imperative to have a plan. It is important to be on somebody's wait list because if something happens and then you get the call, well, that there's availability, then you can take it. If not, if you're not ready, you can, when you get the call that something in your bracket is available, you can say, no, I'm not ready. They'll save your place in line and move down the list. So these communities all require a buy-in. Maravilla is going to be probably the most affordable of them. They have different options for buy-ins, and some of these are amortized with a payback period. It's a process and a system that one needs to really get familiar with, and that takes time. That is not a decision anybody needs to be making during a crisis. Go ahead.
So out of the top ones there, which ones can you stay there until the end? I mean,
All of these,
No, Maravilla doesn't have, nursing unless you hire somebody.
but you can still bring them
Oh,
in.
right, but that's
Right.
an extra cost. So,
Mhm.
so isn't, the Samarkand,
Mhm.
you know, everything is taken care of until you die.
Same with Valverde and Casa Dorinda.
Well, financially.
Yeah, this one is a life plan, this one's a life care model. And I don't remember, I'm catching up with Sam Arcan next week, ironically.
They also have an endowment.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
So if something happens and you run out of money, they won't take you out.
yeah,
Not all of them are that way.
right,
In fact, seldom these are that way, but
Mhm.
in Santa Barbara, we have, well,
yeah. And Casa Dorinda is unique of all of these in that it's a life plan model where you get evaluated both from a financial and a physical and an emotional perspective. And the price that you pay to get in it is that price throughout your life there. Again, with the buy-in model and how that financially plays out, it's a whole different ballgame. But believe it or not, I wanted to draw your attention to Casa Dorinda being at that price point. This is not the most expensive CCRC in the country. The most expensive CCRC, I forget what it's called, but it's in Palo Alto, and the buy-in is up to $5 million. So the point is, the moral of all of this, given the buy-in requirements and or availability, have a plan in place. Go ahead.
Where is this Palo Alto, Northern California?
Yep, San Francisco. So now you have the flexible lease communities. So Grand Vita is a one-time entrance fee of $7,500. Right now, they have 2 studios available that are gonna range anywhere from $6,200 to $8,200. This is in assisted living. They do have memory care on site. It is full. So technically, you would have the continuum of care here as well, but with no buy-in fee. And it's going to be on a month-to-month basis. Villa Santa Barbara is downtown across from the courthouse. There's a one-time community fee of $2,500. I do believe Woodglens is the same. Because they're licensed for assisted living, but they do have independent living as well. Same with all of them, actually. And it's gonna be anywhere from $4,000 up. Now, short-term stays are available. What I highly recommend keeping in the back of your mind as you're supporting a senior loved one, when it comes to making a decision if something's a good fit or if it's not, there is the option of respite stay. And the respite stay, there is a furnished on-site apartment that a senior loved one can reside in on a trial basis. And those you would want to book out or reserve a minimum of 3 months out because they get full really fast. So, like I said, make notes on this, and then we can talk a little bit more in depth about what's available over lunch. The next question that I get is, do we need to sell the family home to pay for retirement? What do we do with the house? This is where I kick off my senior transition specialist hat, and now I'm going into real estate planning. These are the questions that you're going to want to ask. Does it make sense to rent out the family home for 2 tax seasons? Specifically 2 tax seasons. Because if it does, well, I'm going to run a couple of scenarios. I'm going to run what I call an asset performance test to see how the house would perform as a rental. If there are rentals in the family estate trust already, I'm going to still see how they're doing anyway. That's just what I do. Then we're going to look at We're gonna bring in the family financial planner. You're gonna hear from Sam later on about how he approaches this subject. What we ultimately want to have an answer to is, first of all, has anybody heard of a family who has fought over real estate after somebody passes away? Funny how that happens. 70% of families, statistically speaking, fight. And a lot of people just don't want that. That is why the founder of Keller Williams real estate planner, Danny Hara, wrote the book, Property Decisions, because it talks about the different real estate strategies that he has helped people walk through with their power team of 4 on coming up with a real estate plan to avoid conflict after the parents transition into their next life. So one of the things that we talk about is when it comes to transferring property, some people are of the opinion that they like their kids and they want to put them on the title of their home so that they have a place to live. But that, putting somebody on the title of the home when you are still alive, that's going to be the carry over in cost basis. And upon passing away, the people on title are not going to get the step up in basis to what the fair market value is of the home at the time of the passing. So if they were to decide to sell, they would get hit with some pretty massive capital gains, because putting people on title while you're still alive, they absorb the parents' original cost basis of the home when they purchased it however many years ago. But if you are not on title, if your descendants inherit a home through the family trust, upon passing of the parent, they would engage with me to order the DOD appraisal, date of death appraisal, which determines the fair market value of the home. That is the new cost basis for the descendants. If they choose to sell, it is highly unlikely they will get saddled with capital gains taxes. And one of the questions that we had with my grandmother when we sold her house was, will she get grandpa's step up in cost basis on the home? Because they owned it together, and she did, because he lived there within the 5 years of her selling the home. So she did get the step up of cost basis. And when we sold her house, she was able to take advantage of IRS code 121C, which is, if there's 2 people living in the home, you qualify for up to $500,000 in capital gains exclusions. So anyway, she received grandpa's step up in basis on the home. When we sold it, at the time it was in Ventura, I sold it for close to 7. There was still enough of that 500,000 where she did not have to pay capital gains taxes. So I always tell people, if you like your kids, don't put them on the title of your home. Put the home in a trust. Make sure the trust is funded, because if it's not funded, it's invalid and the trust will have to go to probate court. And the reason we want to avoid that is because probate, while it is perfectly viable and the solution for wills, probate court can be very, very expensive and time consuming and just suck the money out of the estate. When I say time consuming, one of my favorite probate attorneys prides himself on getting probate cases done in as little as 9 months. I'm just going to leave that there. So that's why it is so important to have a will or a trust done by the correct professionals, because we don't want to be paying for that mistake on down the road. Now, there are some other things to be mindful of. As people meet with their professionals and they create a trust, some people are going to create a revocable trust, which means it can be changed during their lifetime. And then there's going to be the irrevocable trust. It cannot be changed. Some people, and I've seen this because it caused conflict, some people did not catch on that their loved one was experiencing early onset dementia. And at some point, those loved ones were making changes to the trust. And it was too late, and certain people, there was bad blood after that, because the general consensus of that situation was, had this person been of sound mind, those changes would never have been made. So it is important to keep in the back of our minds, should we at some point make the family trust revocable or irrevocable so that it cannot be changed? Definitely talk with the estate planning attorney about that. I also say to revisit the trust every so often, because there are going to be changes in the family situation. There's going to be new children, or maybe somebody gets divorced, or somebody passes away and the trust instructions need to be rewritten. There's a lot of things, changes in life for people who are beneficiaries of the trust that are going to want to have those changes reflected in the family trust. And I have lots of recommendations for estate planning attorneys who are really, really good at what they do. A lot of times, if you take a trust to an estate planning attorney to look at, they will not review another attorney's work. They won't. If that attorney is retired and or no longer practicing, what they will do is they will talk with you, and then they will look at what that trust contains, and they will simply make a new one. Now, when it comes to trusts, do we know what the difference is between the trustees and the beneficiaries? So the trustee is the person who is in charge of administering the trust, managing the accounting, filing the trust tax returns. It's a huge job in and of itself. And it is a job that comes with what I feel are 21 responsibilities of trustees. And when people arbitrarily assign the role of trustee to who they think is the most knowledgeable, responsible, et cetera, child, think about it this way. If you are recently deceased, the children are going to be grieving. Why would you wish it upon them to take on this new job of being the trustee of the estate? These are the bona fide responsibilities that trustees have. And I can email you this because I know this is very small print. But, there are things like death certificates that need to be obtained, to be sent to the Office of Social Security. You'll want to have somebody recorded on the master death list so that in the event of identity fraud, nobody can take out a credit card or et cetera, in the name of the trust. Go ahead.
Before we leave the trust, I want to know, how old could a trust be?
How old can the trust be?
Yes, my trust was made in 1998.
Okay.
And so when my husband died,
Uh-huh.
of course I have not had any problems. It served the purposes.
Okay.
But if I die, is that trust, so I am sick, is that trust still okay? Or should I have it, contact my lawyer and have it updated?
I would definitely recommend
Okay.
consulting with your attorney,
Yes.
because your attorney will be able to advise you on what has been going on within your family and making sure that it's relevant to your situation today. Definitely recommend that. So when it comes to responsibilities for trustees, number 16 is the time of death appraisal of the home, the family home. And then below, you're going to see contact the CPA, because they're going to want tax returns for the last 2 years. And by the way, you're going to have to get an EIN number for the estate tax return. And I've seen people get stuck on that.
We have to get one.
An EIN number. I don't know how to explain it, but the CPA will advise on that. So again, these are all the requirements of managing a trust. And when it comes to who has to do this, I don't wish that on my children. When it's gonna be my turn, I'm gonna hire a professional fiduciary. Professional fiduciaries, think of them as trustees for hire. You can get them at your local bank. There's a whole trust officer department at the local bank. There's one that we work with very well at Farmers and Merchants Bank. There are also professional trustee companies like Channel Islands Fiduciary. There's Mark Watson Fiduciary, there's Quinn Fiduciary, and that's what they do, is they manage estates. And they do a really good job of it. They do charge for that. Obviously, it's a paid service, and every one is going to be different depending on the weight of the estate. So we talked about the IRS exemption of 121C if somebody is living in their home, and what the exemptions are, what the credits are for if you've lived in your home owned by one person. You would qualify for up to $250,000 in gains to be taxed on, and then there's joint tenants, people who own the home together on title. You would qualify for up to $500,000 in gains. But then there's the home that you don't live in, which is the investment property. And this is where I've been able to develop my niche with investors within the senior niche, because it's a logical, it's a calculated decision, and this is where we really shine in terms of planning. So when people come to me and say that they're thinking of selling their home, or that they feel that that's the next best decision, this is the first thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to determine what I feel to be verified by the CPA, what I feel would be capital gains liability. And I tell this story, there's a story I like to tell. Before I got my license in real estate, I was the director of marketing at a different brokerage. And when the broker had transacted a home in Montecito for, I think it was $3.8 million, the beneficiaries of the trust received a call or a letter from the IRS, and they called the broker and said, verbatim, "What is this bill from the IRS for $1.4 million, and why do we have to pay it?" So there are ways you cannot avoid paying capital gains taxes. You cannot. But what you can do is you can form a plan with the real estate so that your taxes get deferred or otherwise. And that's why we have these conversations. Sometimes people will leave their family home for rent, and they will take out a home equity line of credit or a reverse mortgage, and they will downsize themselves into a situation that's more appropriate while renting the family home out. One of the questions I'm going to ask is, do you need the income to sustain the life you desire? We're going to ask a lot of questions around that to help make the decision of what would be in the best interest of the senior loved one and also the beneficiaries of the trust. When it comes to, like I said, 1 out of every 3 homes in the United States is a rental. That's a lot of homes. And if there's an investment property, we're going to want to look at not just capital gains, but we're going to want to talk with the CPA about, has any depreciation been factored in? We need to look at a lot of different things to determine not just how the investment property is performing as a rental, but what are the ramifications upon selling, what is the fair market value, all of these things. Because if we can make a strategic decision on how the asset is performing, determine what that fair market value is, and we're going to want to look at return on investment, what's the cap rate, cash on cash return. Those are things that we're going to want to plan for, because if we sell it and we put and we do a 1031 exchange, which is IRS code 1031, where we defer paying the taxes on the sale of an investment property by putting the proceeds into another. It only works on investment properties, and so by taking the primary home and converting it into an investment property by renting it out for 2 tax seasons, that's the start of that process. So when it comes to how to defer paying capital gains taxes, we've got, like I talked about earlier, the stepped up in basis upon the significant other's passing. Is there enough of a step up to bridge that gap? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. One of the things that I talk to people about when I ask them if they need the income from their rental to sustain the life they desire, they say, well, yes, I do, but I'm tired of being a landlord. Sorry, Sam, I'm just gonna say it. There's a cliche term called the terrible T's when it comes to being a landlord, where they are tired of tenants, termites, toilets, trash, taxes, the list, I mean, there's a lot of T's. But a lot of landlords find themselves in a position where they're tired of taking calls, bottom line. And what I see a lot of tired landlords doing is a strategy where they sell the investment property, they do a 1031 exchange into a Delaware statutory trust. Sam is going to talk about that. We also have another strategy where we do a deferred sales trust, which is extremely complicated. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but it is certainly an option. And then there's, of course, a 1031 exchange in general, which facilitates the bottom two. But the purpose of this is to ensure, and there are a lot of ways that we can do this, is to really ensure that we pass on, we carry over the generational wealth into that next property, and we don't pay unnecessary taxes. One of the conversations that I had with an investor just a few months ago, she was renting out her mother's home, her late mother's home, and she was getting $3,000 per month in rent on it. And this home was not local, it's in Lompoc. And I said, well, have you fully depreciated? Is everything paid? Yes and yes. I said, well, what if that equity can be working better for you? And she said, well, that's my question to you, is how can we make my equity work? Because I've fully paid off this house, we have all this equity wrapped into this single family home in Lompoc, and I'm only getting $3,000 a month. So when we talked to my lender, we came up with a solution that doing a DSCR loan, which is a loan that is made on the income potential of a property, a rental property. We're going to sell her house, her rental in Lompoc, and we are currently in escrow on her replacement property. And the replacement property is, we forecast it'll collect anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 a month in rent. So the purpose of these conversations, I mean, with this, she's literally exchanging $3,000 a month while putting in some cash into something where she's going to be collecting $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Those are the conversations that I like to have with people, because those strategies are there when the planning is done far enough in advance. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then I'm going to pass the baton to Sam, because he is a certified financial planner. But when we start talking about a 1031 exchange, this is where we're going to bring in a CPA to join us on the conversation. Like I said, we need the advice of the CPA. Go ahead.
Can you use any of the money, say you sell your house, can you use any of the money to kind of defer some of the capital gains to get into one of these places?
That is a great question, and I'm going to touch on that in just a moment, and Sam is going to talk about that. So this is the reason why I harp on people to do 1031 exchanges. Now, this is just an example, this is an arbitrary example. If we are to sell the home, the family home, for $1 million and not do a 1031 exchange, then the seller of the family home will have just an estimate of things, taxes, etc. The sale of the $1 million home puts this amount in our pockets. Now, if we defer the sale, if we defer paying the taxes by doing a 1031 exchange of the $1 million property, then there's $1 million that does not go in our pockets. It is to specifically reinvest. In fact, when we do a 1031 exchange, we work with what's called a qualified intermediary, which is a neutral third party that comes in and exchanges the funds from the home that is being sold and puts the funds into the property, whatever we're buying, through their accounts. We don't touch this. Now, I've had people say, well, gosh, that's a huge difference between here and when I work with a lot of people who do a 1031 exchange into a Delaware statutory trust, that is going to produce income. It is a trust that is wrapped around a portfolio of properties or Amazon warehouses or student housing, senior housing. The ESPN headquarters is wrapped in a Delaware statutory trust. You can count on getting anywhere from 4-ish% to 6-ish, depending on how much risk. Like I said, we're gonna put a couple pins on that and circle back to it. And when I say, well, sometimes I don't have access to this, this is what only a financial planner has access to this, because you have to be an accredited investor to qualify to do a Delaware statutory trust. And somebody says, well, I can just put this money into a bond or a CD and get guaranteed 3 to 4%. Well, fine, but you're not putting $1 million because those don't qualify. That's where we get very creative, and that's where we have the guidance of the power team of 4 to support those decisions and the viability of certain strategies.
What is the Medicare tax? What is that?
The which one?
The Medicare tax, I've never heard of that.
So the Medicare tax was introduced during, as part of Obamacare. That's how Obamacare gets funded, essentially.
Oh, interesting.
So there are some rules, and Sam, I'm almost done, I know I'm at an hour, but there are some rules that there are a lot of rules that need to be followed in order to complete a 1031 exchange. Now, people were under the misconception that if you sell a single family home, you have to do a 1031 exchange into another family home. And that is not the case. You can do an apartment building and go into land. You have to exchange into anything in this category. And it has to be in the United States and or U.S. territory, but not Puerto Rico. And this is another thing to be aware of when it comes to 1031 exchanges. When you are selling they call it the relinquishing property, in this case I'm referencing the family home. Let's say that we rented it out to a family member for 2 or 3 years, and we were able to convert that family home into an investment property. So we have 45 days to get the next property under contract, and then you have another 45 days to close on it. Now, this is where creativity comes in, because there are a lot of, if you do this, then that's.
Wait, what did you say?
45 and 45. It's 180 days total.
45 and 45 are not 180.
Okay, but you have 180 days to close on the replacement property.
You have 6 months to close completely and 45 days to identify from the close of escrow. You got it.
Thank you. So, the the idea is that people get hung up on if they're buying multiple properties and or exchanging into multiple properties. Sometimes things don't always go to plan with the timeline and or they fall out of escrow and or other things happen. But because of this timeline, a lot of people don't want to exchange into another type of real property. This is where that Delaware statutory trust comes into play because they can be closed on in a few days. So these are just a couple of success stories. This is the one I mentioned where they bought this behind the Indianapolis Speedway, and they are getting an 8% cap. And by the way, 8% cap, that's considered very high, and there's not a lot of that here. So that's why it's important to be mindful of what else is out there. And then this one is one that Sam and I just worked on. We just closed it, gosh, a month ago. This was a duplex that was performing okay-ish, and they were tired of getting calls. So I sold it, and we worked with the qualified intermediary, and we put them into a Delaware statutory trust, which they qualified for because they are accredited investors, and they were able to exchange their below market rents that they were getting in this property into a Delaware statutory trust, which is performing at, I'll let Sam talk about it, but they are still collecting income on it, on a similar, what am I trying to say? They're still collecting income because they do need the income to sustain the life that they desire. And then this is just another case study where, and this could have gone many, many different ways, but this is a case study of a family where the father passed away, so the mother received a step-up in basis on the apartment building that he owned. And so the question was, what do we do with this? The kids are not going to want to manage this, and they definitely didn't. So we brought, this was a colleague of mine, his story, but he brought in that power team of 4, and they came up with a plan. They came up with a plan through the trust to transact the apartment building and use the proceeds as down payments on homes for their kids. Because 2 of them lived locally and the other 2 were not, different lifestyles, different priorities. This was how they created that plan. The kids were able to predetermine their inheritance, and the way that she looked at it was, I'm able to bless my children while I'm still alive. And after I'm gone, there will be no squabbling about what to do with the estate because everybody has their home, and they were able to come up with that real estate plan. So this is a link to my calendar. I offer consultations at no cost to just make sure that everybody who comes to my seminar has their questions answered, and to look at what the framework is of that power team of 4 that they have advocating for them, and also provide resources, just kind of next steps for everybody to make sure that they're having the right conversations with the right members of their family, and really coming up with the framework of a viable real estate plan for all the reasons that make sense to them. So go ahead and take out your phones, scan this QR code. You can also give me a call and let me know when you're available, and we can sit down and have a chat. But that's my presentation in a nutshell. And you can also connect with me on socials. I have a YouTube channel where I'm always posting a lot of this kind of guidance for people to know about. And if you have a friend that would like to come to my next seminar next month, 3rd Thursday of the month, you're certainly welcome to send them my way.
Third.
Sam and I do these on the 3rd Thursday of every month.
Oh, that's terrific, I can send my son.
Yep, you can. You can. So here's my contact information. Do with it what you will. We're going to take a short break so that Sam can set up his computer and then use the restroom, grab a bottle of water, but definitely schedule your follow-up with me just so we can sit down and have a chat. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
How long is